I spent 50 years mourning the wrong loss, and it took my grandson to show me what I'd actually been grieving all along. My name is Walter. I'm 73 years old, and I live in a small town in Montana where the sky is so big it makes you feel both infinite and insignificant at the same time. I've lived here my entire life, worked the same ranch for 47 years until I retired, buried my wife here 6 years ago, and raised 3 daughters in a house that always felt like it was missing something. A son. I wanted a son. And I spent half a century believing that want had poisoned everything good in my life. My wife Helen and I got married when I was 23 and she was 21. We were young and in love and full of plans. We wanted a big family, 4 or 5 kids running around the ranch, helping with chores, learning to ride horses, carrying on the life we'd built. We wanted sons and daughters both, the whole package. Our first daughter, Amy, was born 10 months after we got married. Beautiful baby, healthy, strong lungs on her. I loved her the moment I saw her. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed it wasn't a boy. Not disappointed in her, disappointed in the situation. I'd always pictured teaching a son to rope cattle, to fix engines, to be a man in the way my father had taught me. Helen wanted to try again right away. We were young, we had time. Our second daughter, Beth, came 2 years later, another healthy, beautiful girl. I told myself the next one would be a boy. The odds were in our favor, right? Sarah was born 3 years after Beth, third daughter, 3 girls under 6 years old. The house was chaos, diapers and dolls and little dresses everywhere. Helen was exhausted but happy. She loved being a mother, loved our girls, and I loved them too, I did. But I couldn't shake this feeling of incompleteness, this sense that I was supposed to have a son and something had gone wrong. We tried one more time. Helen was nervous about a 4th pregnancy. 3 kids was already a lot, and money was tight on a ranch hand's salary. But I convinced her, just one more try, one more chance for a son. Another daughter, Rebecca, our 4th girl. I remember standing in the hospital hallway after Rebecca was born, and I felt this crushing disappointment that I was ashamed of but couldn't deny. 4 daughters, no son, no boy to carry on the family name, to learn the work I'd spent my life doing, to be the son I dreamed of having. Helen was done after Rebecca. 4 kids, 4 pregnancies, she'd given me everything she could, and I should have been grateful. And I was grateful on one level, but on another level, deeper down, I was bitter, angry at fate or God or whatever had decided I wouldn't get the son I wanted. That bitterness seeped into everything, though I didn't realize it at the time. I see it now, looking back with the clarity of age, but then I was blind to it. I treated my daughters well, I think. I provided for them. I was never cruel or neglectful, but I was distant in ways I couldn't even articulate. When Amy wanted to learn to ride, I taught her, but without the enthusiasm I'd imagined having with a son. When Beth showed interest in helping with the ranch work, I let her, but I never really invested in teaching her the way I would have taught a boy. I kept waiting for them to be interested in girl things so I could hand them off to Helen. When they wanted to play with dolls or dress up, I felt relieved. That was Helen's territory. But when they wanted to do boy things, I felt resentful, like they were reminding me of what I didn't have. Helen called me out on it once when Amy was about 12. "You're punishing them for not being boys," she said. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said, defensive. "I take care of them. I provide for them." "You provide," she agreed, "but you don't connect. You're here, but you're not present. And they feel it, Walter. They know you're disappointed in them." "I'm not disappointed in them," I insisted. "I'm disappointed in the situation." "There is no situation separate from them," Helen said quietly. "They are the situation, and when you reject the situation, you reject them." I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't hear it, so I didn't. I told myself Helen was being dramatic, that I was a good father, that my daughters had everything they needed. Lots of kids grew up with distant fathers and turned out fine.
This was just how men were. We provided, we protected, but we weren't meant to be emotionally demonstrative like mothers were. The years passed. The girls grew up. Amy was quiet and bookish, always had her nose in a novel. Beth was the practical one, good with her hands, could fix anything. Sarah was the social one, always organizing things, taking care of everyone. Rebecca was the wild one, the rebel, always pushing boundaries. They were all remarkable in their own ways, but I couldn't fully see it because I was too busy seeing what they weren't. They weren't sons. They weren't the boys I'd imagined teaching and mentoring and passing my legacy to. They all left home as soon as they could. Amy went to college in Seattle. Beth moved to Billings and became a mechanic, of all things. Sarah got married at 21 to a guy from Bozeman and moved there. Rebecca took off to Colorado and barely stayed in touch. Helen said I'd driven them away. I said they were just living their lives, that kids leave home, that's natural. But deep down, I knew she was right. They'd left because they'd spent their whole childhoods feeling like disappointments to their father. Helen got sick when she was 61, cancer. She fought it for 3 years, and I was with her every step of the way. The girls came home when they could, especially toward the end. Sitting in that hospital room during those final weeks, watching her fade, I finally told her what I should have told her decades earlier. "You were right," I said, "about the girls, about me being distant, about all of it. You were right." She squeezed my hand. She was too weak to say much by then, but she managed. "Tell them, not me, them." She died on a Tuesday morning in October. The funeral was packed. Helen had been beloved in our small town. The girls were there with their families. Amy had 2 kids, boys, both of them, teenagers now. Beth had a daughter. Sarah had 3 kids, mixed boys and girls. Rebecca had just had her first baby, a boy, 6 months old. After the funeral, as people were leaving, I tried to talk to my daughters. I wanted to tell them what I'd told Helen, that I was sorry, that I'd been wrong, that I'd wasted their childhoods being disappointed in something that was never their fault. But I couldn't find the words. We stood there in our black clothes, them surrounding me, and I opened my mouth and nothing came out. They hugged me and told me to call if I needed anything, and then they left, back to their own lives, and I was alone in the house where I'd raised 4 daughters while wishing for sons. The next few years were lonely. I rattled around the house, retired from ranch work, went through Helen's things slowly, felt sorry for myself. The girls called occasionally, visited on holidays. Things were cordial, but not close. We'd never been close. That was my doing, and I knew it, but I still didn't know how to fix it. Then something happened that changed everything. Rebecca's son, my youngest grandson, named Henry, came to stay with me for the summer when he was 16. Rebecca was going through a rough patch, a divorce, needed some space to figure things out. She asked if Henry could spend a few months with me, help around the property, get away from the drama. I said yes, though I was nervous. I didn't know this kid. I'd seen him at family gatherings, but never spent real time with him. And I was 70 years old. What did I know about relating to a 16-year-old boy? Henry arrived in June, sullen and resentful, being shipped off to Montana to stay with his grandfather. Typical teenager, angry at the world, angry at his parents, angry at being pulled away from his friends and his life.
For the first week, we barely spoke. He'd stay in his room or wander around the property with his headphones on. I'd make meals and he'd eat them without comment. We were 2 strangers living in the same house. Then one afternoon, I was in the garage trying to fix an old tractor I'd been meaning to restore for years, and Henry wandered in. He stood there, watching me struggle with a seized bolt for a few minutes, then said, "You're doing it wrong." "Excuse me?" I said, looking up. "That bolt, you're doing it wrong. You need to heat it first, expand the metal, otherwise you'll strip it." He showed me. Kid knew what he was talking about.
We spent the next 2 hours working on that tractor together, and for the first time since he'd arrived, I saw him come alive. He was good with his hands, good with mechanics, asked smart questions, had an intuitive sense for how things worked. "Where'd you learn all this?" I asked him. "Mom," he said. "She's been teaching me since I was little. She's the best mechanic I know." Mom. Beth. My daughter who'd become a mechanic because she'd loved working with her hands, who I'd never fully appreciated because I was too busy being disappointed she wasn't a son. Over the following weeks, Henry and I fell into a routine. We'd work on projects together, fixing things around the property, restoring that tractor, building a new fence. We'd have dinner together and he'd tell me about school, about his interests, about his dreams of maybe studying engineering. And I'd tell him stories about the ranch, about Montana, about my life. Stories I'd never told anyone, not even Helen. Stories I'd been saving, I realized, for a son, for this exact kind of connection I'd always believed I'd have with a boy. One evening, we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset over the mountains, and Henry said something that stopped my heart. "Mom says you never really liked having daughters." I felt like I'd been punched. "That's not true," I said automatically. "She says you wanted sons and were disappointed that all of you were girls. She says that's why you were always so distant with them." I couldn't deny it. Not to this kid who was looking at me with his mother's eyes, waiting for truth. "I was a fool," I said finally. "I spent so much time wanting something I didn't have that I couldn't see what I did have. Your mother, your aunts, they were right there, wanting to connect with me, and I was too caught up in my own disappointment to see them." "That's pretty messed up," Henry said. Not angrily, just matter-of-factly. "It is," I agreed. "It's one of my biggest regrets. Maybe my biggest regret." We sat in silence for a while. Then Henry said, "For what it's worth, I think Mom turned out pretty awesome despite you." "She did," I said. "They all did. No thanks to me." "You could tell them that," Henry suggested. "It might mean something." Over the rest of that summer, Henry became the grandson I'd never known I needed. We worked together, talked together, existed together in a way that felt natural and easy. And through him, I started to see my daughters differently. I saw Beth in Henry's mechanical skills, his problem-solving mind, his quiet competence. I realized she'd been trying to connect with me through exactly these things when she was young, and I'd been too blind to see it. I saw Amy in the books Henry read, the thoughtful questions he asked about life and meaning. I remembered Amy trying to talk to me about the books she loved when she was a teenager, and me dismissing it as girl stuff I didn't understand. I saw Sarah in the way Henry tried to take care of things, organize our days, make sure we had groceries and clean clothes. I remembered Sarah doing the same thing as a kid, trying to manage the household, and me taking it for granted instead of appreciating her. I saw Rebecca in Henry's rebellious streak, his questioning of authority, his refusal to just accept things as they were. I remembered Rebecca pushing back against rules and expectations, and me seeing it as defiance instead of strength. My daughters had been showing me who they were their entire lives. They'd been offering me connection, trying to bond over shared interests, wanting me to see them. And I'd been so fixated on what they weren't that I'd completely missed who they were. The revelation broke something open in me. I'd spent 50 years believing my disappointment was about not having sons. But the real tragedy wasn't that I didn't have sons. The real tragedy was that I did have daughters, 4 remarkable daughters, and I'd been too blind to appreciate them. When Henry went home at the end of summer, I did something I should have done years earlier. I called each of my daughters. Not quick check-in calls, but real conversations. I asked them about their lives, their work, their interests. I listened, really listened. And then I told them what I should have told them decades ago. I told them I was sorry. I told them I was a fool. I told them they deserved a father who saw them for who they were, not who he wished they'd be. I told them I'd wasted years of their childhoods mourning something imaginary while they were right there, real and present and wanting my attention. Amy cried. Beth was quiet for a long time. Sarah said she'd waited her whole life to hear me say that. Rebecca just said, "About damn time, Dad." I asked if I could start over, not erase the past. I couldn't do that, but build something new going forward, learn who they actually are, be the father I should have been. They were cautious, understandably. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, but they were willing to try. That was 3 years ago. Since then, I've been getting to know my daughters, really know them. Amy comes to visit and brings me books she thinks I'll like, and we talk about them. Beth and I video chat while she's working on cars, and she explains what she's doing, and I realize she's brilliant at what she does. Sarah organizes family gatherings, and I actually help instead of just showing up, and I see how she holds everyone together. Rebecca and I have slowly rebuilt our relationship through honesty. She doesn't let me get away with anything, which is exactly what I need.
I've learned that Beth is the one who inherited my practical skills and love of fixing things, that Amy has a depth of insight I never had, that Sarah has organizational genius that keeps entire families functioning, that Rebecca has courage I always wished I had but never did. I've learned that everything I wanted to teach a son, responsibility, competence, integrity, strength, they already had. They learned it despite me, not because of me. They became remarkable women without my guidance, even though they deserved to have it. Last month, all 4 of my daughters came home with their families for a weekend. We spread out across the property, some in the house, some in campers, everyone together in a way we'd never been. Henry, now 19 and in college, was there too. On Saturday night, we had a big dinner outside, all of us around tables pushed together, 3 generations of family. At some point, Amy raised her glass and said, "To Dad, who's finally figured out what the rest of us have known all along, that his daughters are pretty great." Everyone laughed and clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in all those years of wanting a son. I felt complete. Later, I was helping clean up with Beth, and she said, "You know what's funny? You spent my whole childhood wishing I was a boy, and I spent my whole childhood trying to be what you wanted, learning mechanical skills, being tough, not crying. I became a mechanic partly because I was still trying to prove something to you." "You don't have to prove anything," I said. "You never did. I'm the one who had to prove I could be a decent father, and I failed at that for way too long." "You're doing better now," she said simply. "That counts for something." I'm 73 years old now. I spent 50 years of my life mourning the loss of sons I never had. But the real loss wasn't the sons. The real loss was all those years I could have spent knowing and loving my daughters and didn't. I can't get those years back. They're gone, along with Helen, who tried to tell me what I was doing wrong, but died before I really understood. That's something I have to live with. But I have this. I have now. I have 4 remarkable daughters who, despite everything, were willing to give me another chance. I have grandchildren who are teaching me what I should have learned decades ago. I have the remainder of my life to be the father I should have been all along. Someone asked me recently if I still wish I'd had a son. I thought about it honestly before answering. "No," I said, "I don't. Because if I'd had a son, I might never have learned what I needed to learn. I might have poured all my attention into him and ignored my daughters even more. I might have stayed stuck in my narrow idea of what family should look like instead of seeing what it actually was. What I wish is that I'd been able to see my daughters clearly from the beginning, that I'd appreciated them for who they were instead of resenting them for who they weren't, that I'd understood sooner that children are not vehicles for our unfulfilled dreams. They're complete people, deserving to be seen and loved for themselves. But I didn't understand that then. I understand it now. Last week, Rebecca called me. She's pregnant again, she told me. A girl this time. She and her partner are excited. And then she said something that made me cry. "We're thinking of naming her Helen, after Mom. Is that okay with you?" "More than okay," I managed to say. Good, she said, because I want her to grow up knowing she came from a line of strong women. And I want you to be part of her life, Dad, really part of it. I want her to know her grandfather, the version of you we're finally getting to know. Helen. My granddaughter will be named Helen, after the woman who tried to teach me what I'm only now learning, after the woman who loved our daughters fiercely and tried to protect them from my disappointment. I won't be around to see this little Helen grow up completely. I'm 73 and time is finite, but I'll be there for as much as I can. And this time, I'll see her, really see her, not as a wish or a disappointment or a reminder of anything missing, but as herself, a person, a human being who deserves to be loved for exactly who she is. That's what I learned finally after 70 years of getting it wrong. Children aren't meant to fulfill our dreams or compensate for our disappointments. They're meant to be themselves completely and fully, and our job is to love them in their completeness, not despite it. I wanted sons. I got daughters. And it took me 50 years to understand that I got exactly what I needed, even if it wasn't what I thought I wanted. My daughters saved me from my own stupidity eventually. They gave me another chance when they didn't have to. They let me be their father, finally, really, after all those years of me just going through the motions. That's grace. That's love. That's what family actually is when you stop trying to make it match some picture in your head and let it be what it is. I'm 73 years old, and finally, I understand what it means to be a father. Better late than never, I suppose, though I wish, more than anything, it hadn't taken so long.
Old spruce wood, thumb on the bass, quiet patter, piano like a lantern in the dusk, breathing in the dust of the room. Ancient past, stone worn thin by names forgotten, boot prints, bare feet, every burden. I take my place among them, where wisdom meets the journey, not in books stacked to the ceiling, but in calloused hands and tired shoulders, sharing bread at the